All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Really excited to have this conversation. Something I have learned in my time in the flat earth community is that flat earthers will say and claim things about themselves that are simply not true. For example, flat earthers will claim to be pilots, but they're not actually pilots. Bob Nodell claimed to be a commercial pilot, and he was lying. He was not a commercial pilot. And then people in the flat earth community will claim to have doctorates and to be doctors, and that's also has been shown to be not true. For those of you that missed my conversation with Stephen Alonzo, he claimed to be a doctor and a pilot. Both of those were not true. So anyway, there's something important when you have the truth on your side. You don't have to lie and you don't have to make these things up. But today we're going to talk to someone who actually has a doctorate, who actually is a doctor. And I am excited to have with us Dr. David Weisskopf. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Yes, and I will let the audience know a little about you. So, number one, your name stuck out to me in this world of flat Earth because there's someone named David Weiss in the flat Earth world that most people are familiar with. He goes by Flat Earth Dave. And so, jokingly, tongue in cheek, I'm going to refer to you, David Weisskopf, as the globe's answer to David Weiss. But you do have an actual doctorate from Touro University. You also have a master's in Jewish studies from Hebrew University, a master in Israel studies from Hebrew University, and you're also fluent in both biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew. And so I'm so thankful to have you here. You reached out to me. Word about the final experiment spread internationally very quickly. You are coming to us right now from Jerusalem, which has been your home for at least a couple of decades. And I'm excited to dive into the Bible today, to the scriptures, and to look at the biblical Hebrew from someone who's an expert. I'm excited to learn. Hopefully everyone else that's joining us today is excited to learn as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. You can talk a little bit about you and your YouTube channel, and then we can go ahead and dive into the Bible, into the book of Genesis.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate how quickly you responded to me. I reached out to you because I was getting really frustrated with both flat earthers and atheists agreeing that we Jews have ever believed that the earth was flat using Hebrew scriptures. And it drives me crazy to see these debates happen out of ignorance. It's one thing when people know what they're talking about and disagree with each other. It's another thing when people accuse Jews of believing something that we don't believe and never have. I do have a YouTube channel that I would appreciate people coming and checking out. It's Dr. D 1967. Right now I'm doing a Bible study, a weekly Bible study on parental alienation in the Torah, which anybody out there who's interested in that subject, be happy to have you come and subscribe to the channel. And that's about it. Do you want to jump right in?
Let's jump in. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. And the name is, or the title is, Do Jews Believe That the Earth is Flat or a Globe? And before going into it, I want to give a disclaimer about Greek texts, which includes the Septuagint, the New Testament, and Josephus. I don't understand any Greek. It's all Greek to me. It would be irresponsible of me to try to give you answers from Greek texts that I don't have. And just like it's irresponsible for flat earthers and for atheists to give answers that they don't have about the Hebrew text, it would equally be irresponsible for me to give you answers from the Greek text. So I'm going to focus exclusively on Hebrew texts, though I'm aware that there are these other Greek texts out there that are part of this discussion, and you could, certainly find somebody who is more versed in Greek to cover them. But I don't want to do that kind of a disservice to your audience by irresponsibly giving answers that I don't have.
Hey, David, give me 1 second. They're saying they can't see the presentation, which I don't understand.
Okay.
So give me 1 second here. Why wouldn't you guys be able to see it? Sorry, 1 second here. Yeah, so I am so stumped right now. Sorry, give me 1 second here. It's on the stage on my end. Okay. All right, I think they can see it now.
Okay.
Just go ahead and press hide at the bottom there on that little white bar.
Right.
And then
Okay. How's that?
And then we should be good to go. All right, here we go.
Okay. All right, so diving right into it, studying a foreign language requires humility. Though you may be confused in a language that is not your own, the native speaker and listener are not confused with each other. It's arrogant and presumptuous for a non-speaker of a language to impose a foreign agenda on the native speakers. Okay? Language is fluid and ambiguous, and oh, by the way, English is not an exception to that rule about languages. For example, imagine 2,000 years in the future, archaeologists and conspiracy buffs try to decipher English texts. What will they find? Despite all of our technological advances, and if you think about it, we can land probes on other planets and shoot asteroids off course from wherever they're going. We have great Wi-Fi until we need it. But we still have not been able to precisely answer the following question in English. How high is the sky off the ground? Okay, let that sink in. We still cannot articulate in English precisely how high the sky is off the ground. What the heck is primordial soup? Okay, is there a big bowl of soup floating out in outer space? The same way that you would want archaeologists of the future to understand that English expressions can sometimes be fluid, vague, and incomplete, so too I request your patience with the fluidity and ambiguity of the ancient Hebrew language spoken by my ancestors. With that, we're going to go into exegeting the main passage, which is Genesis chapter 1, about this word rakia. And what I did was I have the original Hebrew on one side, along with an English translation provided by Chabad.org on the other side. And the reason why I went with their translation is I really like how they captured in English the way in which Jews have understood this text for centuries before there even was an English language. And particularly when we look at verse 1 here, I really like their translation, and I really don't like most other translations. They do it differently from any other translation I've seen, and I like their difference here. What it says in the Hebrew is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, and Chabad translated it as in the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth. Okay, let that sink in for a second. Doesn't that feel kind of awkward? You want to fix it. You want to send an email to Chabad.org and say, hey, you made a mistake. Something's wrong here. To which Chabad.org would respond back to you, no, we did this on purpose. And what they did was they captured a similar kind of awkwardness that's happening in the Hebrew. the Hebrew is sort of grabbing a hold of you and saying to you to restrain your urge to want to simplify this and fix it when we're talking about a topic that's going to be very complicated, and frankly so complicated that's kind of beyond human words to express, but we're going to try to put them to words anyway. And I think Chabad did a great job on verse 1 of conveying that kind of awkwardness and incompleteness that you want to fix it, and you're not supposed to fix it. You're the one who's supposed to wrestle with these very difficult and deep uh, concepts that the text is about to go into. Verse 2 continues and says, the ha'aretz haita tovu vavohu, and I put that in red because this is another expression that has been a big challenge for theologians for centuries. And let's look at how Chabad translated that. Now, the earth was astonishingly empty, which is, it's a good translation. I think there's other translations that say null and void, something to that effect. But this word, this expression, this phrase, tovu vavohu, I would like to take a little bit of license and stretch that meaning beyond astonishingly empty and say primordial soup. So though that's not literally what that expression says, it captures that ambiguity and that complexity that primordial soup has in English, of this state that the earth and frankly the universe was in at the beginning, that was embryonic and nebulous and globular, blob of stuff that doesn't exist today in the same form. It's a state of matter that doesn't really exist as we know it today, like primordial soup. So if you allow me a little bit of license to stretch the meaning of tohu vohu in Hebrew, it sort of captures this ambiguity and a warning to you that the earth is in this state that we can't really relate to, but we're going to still try to give some words to understand it. And I want to point out a couple of phrases after that that's going to be important for us later. These two words here, al panei. We have al panei hatohem, and over here we have al panei hamayim. Okay, let's look at how Chabad translated this phrase al panei and al panei. It's there twice. So they translated it over here as on, and they translated it over here as over. It's the same phrase, but two different English words. One is on, and the other.
Hey, David, I just lost your audio. Yeah, I lost your audio for some reason. I still can't hear you. Is your microphone like, is it, I don't know if it has like a battery or anything, but it's weird. It just cut out like instantly. Okay, now it says you're muted. When I try to unmute you, it says that you don't have a mic connected. So yeah, you're gonna have to unmute yourself, and it will allow you to unmute once you have a mic connected. This is one of the issues with becoming an expert in something, is you can't be an expert in technology. But I'll let you know once we can hear you. it's going to be important that you're able to press unmute at the bottom of your screen on the StreamYard tab, because it won't let you press that until you have a microphone connected. I think this is what you were mentioning about things working until you need them. Okay, so now it doesn't say unmute anymore, but you're frozen. So you might be rebooting or something. There's someone in the comments. Can you say something, David? Can you hear me? Still can't hear you. I'm not sure why. You could reboot if you would like, if you think that might help. And then I could field some questions right now in the Q&A if people would like, while you're resetting. Yeah, people are saying to disconnect and reconnect the microphone, but I'm guessing you've done that. Maybe try, with everything plugged in, maybe try leaving StreamYard and coming back in. That might be the way to do it. So I do want to highlight a couple of people in the chat. First is Flatzoid was in the chat. I'm not sure if he's still here. So Flatzoid is on record saying that the South Celestial Pole would show a globe. And so we showed the South Celestial Pole, not only from Chile, but also from the GP of the South Celestial Pole. So technically, Flatzoid should be a glober now, if he was going to be honest about what he said. But flat earthers are famous for moving the goalposts. Imagine if we went to Antarctica and there was no 24-hour sun, and we all just continued to pretend like we didn't say that. That would be a definitive way to show that we don't live on a globe. You guys would never let us hear the end of it. Sav was in the chat. Not sure if he still is, but he said that if the sun goes a certain direction away from us in Chile, that would prove we're on a globe, and it did. And so then he changed his mind on that. Hey, David, can you hear us? I cannot hear you, unfortunately. So anyway, flat earthers, I've noticed their predictions are almost always wrong, or if they predict something that they say will falsify flat earth and show a globe, they don't stick with it when that prediction comes true. So only their wrong predictions come true, because we don't live on a flat earth. Yes, Sav also said there's no South Pole, which is false. He must have missed our video. The South Pole is something that is only on a globe, is not on a flat earth. And we just did a video on the South Pole. So the South Pole is devastating for flat earth. Essentially, all they can do is say nah to the South Pole, but it's there. You can visit it from anywhere in the world. And when you travel there, you can go south from anywhere in the world and get there. But if you go south from anywhere on a flat earth, you would actually go farther and farther away from each other. Multiple people would never end up in the same place, heading south from the south of New Zealand and Africa and South America. So flat earthers have no answer for the South Pole whatsoever. And they also will struggle to point to where it would be on a flat Earth map. The only person that has made an attempt at that was Stephen Alonso, and he picked some arbitrary location. Not exactly sure why he picked it, but that was easily falsified. Okay, David is back. Let's see if we can hear you now. Can we hear you now? Still cannot hear you, unfortunately. You're something's going on with your microphone, because we can see you, and I can see you moving, but we cannot hear you. Oh, here we go. No, automatically. Yeah, I don't have any control on my end, unfortunately, to help you with that. By the way, someone made me aware today that Mikey Smith showed up at my church here in Colorado. So that was interesting. I was not there, but he was there with Roger Ledwell, and he filmed the cross on our sign and said it was upside down, which is bizarre. It was not upside down. Hey, David, did you reboot your computer? Or did you just leave and come back? You want to try rebooting? That might be a good idea. All right. Just trying to keep up here on the comments. By the way, the South Pole video also shows that the Earth is rotating. There would never be a geographic South Pole on a sphere unless that sphere was rotating. So that the South Pole not only shows a globe, but it also shows rotation. And Shiloh Carpenter has no answers for any of this. And so he will not post them in the comments. Yes, Sean, they do not understand art, but this is okay. People think that I'm frustrated with the flat Earth community's response to TFE, and I am not. The flat Earth community's response to TFE is actually showing me something that I didn't even see. And more importantly, it's showing flat earthers something that they didn't see, which is that they are in something that very much resembles a cult. So 3 flat earthers who have left because of the final experiment, 3 so far, have contacted me and said, Will, I did not realize I was in a cult. That's their words. And one of them actually said that they didn't know, but they were actually a cult leader. And so this is very important. The reaction we are seeing from the flat Earth community is actually showing the truth about the flat Earth community, and it has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with evidence. It has nothing to do with finding the truth and showing the world. What our latest video in the final experiment series on the South Pole showed was that there are no flat earthers who actually want to prove to the world that we live on a flat earth, because they don't do anything. So if we go all the way back to 1911, 2 men risked their lives, actually more than 2 men. They each led their teams. 2 teams of men risked their lives because they believed we lived on a globe and they wanted to find the South Pole. Compare that today to flat earthers. I can't find a flat earther that is willing to do anything to show that we live on a flat earth. They're just not. They're not willing to be cold, they say. They're not willing to spend money, they say. And they're not even willing to raise money. It takes courage if you really believe in something. And so this is a process, but I'm starting to believe and think that flat earthers don't actually believe we live on a flat earth, because they don't show any evidence of that. Actions speak louder than words. I come along, I'm a nobody. I am introduced to this whole flat earth debate, and I am confident we live on a globe. And I'm so confident that I'm actually willing to do something. I created the final experiment. I gave my own money and my own resources. I gave my own time. Why? Because I'm confident we live on a globe. Flat earthers are not willing to do any of this. Okay. That is the biggest message of TFE. Flat earthers could create their own final experiment. They could create their own experiment that they invite the globe side to, that they make sure they're not misrepresenting the globe side on. You see, I didn't misrepresent the flat earth side. I listened for over a year to what the flat earthers were saying, and they were saying that Antarctica is this ice ring and it's not a continent and there is no 24-hour sun. And a lot of them even said you can't go there. And it's like, okay, great. I'm listening. I hear what you're saying. Now we're going to test it. And we're going to go see who's right. The reason I did this is because I actually believe we live on a globe. And so that confidence came through in my willingness to do this. But flat earthers are not willing to do this. They're not willing to do anything like this. It's just complain, 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 cry, fake, fake, fake. And so this is very, very telling. I am still waiting for a flat earther to do anything like this to prove that they actually are confident and believe that we live on a flat earth, but it just isn't there. By the way, flat earthers like to say that flat earth is censored because it's true. And there's no bigger censorship than by flat earthers by far. So here's a cool test that people should do is someone like Flatzoid, someone like Flat Earth Dave, do a live with me and go into YouTube and show all the people that you've blocked. Flat Earthers censor you as soon as you have information that they can't respond. David,
Can you hear me?
we have you back.
Okay.
So do you want to
All right.
pick up your PowerPoint?
Yes.
By the way, I remember the exact thing you were saying. When the audio went out, you were talking about the fact that they translated the same word on and over.
You were talking about the fact that they translated the same word on and over. Right. Okay. So let me see if I can.
Make sure you click present, share your screen, and then I'll add it.
Make sure you click present, share your screen, and then I'll add it. Right. Okay. All right, how are we?
Fire away.
Can you see me? Hear me?
Yep, you look great.
Fire away. Okay. All right. Yes.
Yep, you look great.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to come back to that later. These two words out, these two phrases, alpane and alpane, which is translated on and over. Another translation can be above. And it goes on to say, God said, let there be light, and there was light. This passage, these first 5 verses, by the way, though they are short in the scriptures and sometimes a little too easy to read quickly, in the Zohar, which is the Kabbalistic Jewish mystical text, these 5 verses take up a whole chapter and go into a lot of detail about the barrier between the spiritual universe, the physical universe, and God moving from one realm into another. And I want to point that out as a mystical Jewish understanding of these verses here. I'm going to move on. So verses 6 through 8, this is where we get this introduction to this word rakia. And I highlighted each time in red. Now let's look at what it first says over here. I'm going to deliberately go into the English, uh, where it says, "And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, and let it separate between water and water." So uh, before I got cut off before by the technical problems, I sort of warned you that the concept of water in this primordial soup may not be the H2O water that you can pour into a cup and drink. It's in a state of matter that we don't really relate to nowadays. That's my 2 cents worth. And here we have this expanse. We don't know what it is. The word rakia in the red, we Jews, for centuries before there even was an English language, have understood it this way that Chabad is translated for us, as this expanse that separates whatever these kinds of waters are from these other kinds of waters. Let's continue. God made the expanse, and it separated between the water that was below the expanse and the water that was above the expanse, and it was so. Now, here in verse 8, we still don't know what this rakia is, or as we're translating it as expanse, but verse 8 is our first uh, clue from the text of what the expanse is. It says, God called the expanse heavens, and it was evening and morning, second day. So now the text clarifies that this expanse, the rakia, is heavens. Verse 9 and 10, this is a little bit of a bonus. So I'm not going to charge any extra for it, but it says, God let the water beneath the heavens gather into one place, and let the dry land appear. And this is that word for dry land. It also can mean continent. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called sea. So God calls this dry land earth. Modern day scientists call it Pangea. And by the way, this little bunny trail that I'm going on here is just an extra bonus. I'm not going to charge you any extra for it. But if you look at this continent here as this big circle here that includes this body of water over here with this island in the middle, and you have this big landmass here, right in the middle of all of that, right over here where my arrow is Jerusalem. So it's kind of refreshing to see modern day science catch up with Torah and to catch up with what we Jews have been believing since ancient times, that Jerusalem is the center of everything. And oh, by the way, as these 7 or 8 continents have moved apart from each other, Jerusalem hasn't moved very far from this location. So that's just an extra bonus for you that I'll throw in there. Going back to our passage of Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 says, And God said, let there be luminaries in the expanse of the heavens to separate between the day and the night, and they shall be signs for you for the appointed times and days and years. Here again, we have the Rakia Hashemayim. So we have these luminaries, whatever they are, they're going to be put out there into the skies, into the expanse or the background of the skies, in order us to create our calendars, right? I want to focus on 3 types of calendars from this verse. First one is a solar calendar, largely used by Christians, other people as well, but a lot of Christians use the solar calendar. And what do I mean by that? On the Gregorian calendar, it focuses on the sun and ignores the moon. So January 1st, which is the Gregorian New Year that a lot of Christians celebrate, always happens in the middle of the winter. It's always the same number of days after the winter solstice every year. However, the moon is irrelevant. Whether there's a new moon, a full moon, a waning moon, a waxing moon, it doesn't matter. January 1st is always fixed to the Earth's position to the sun in the middle of the winter. By contrast, you have the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar. And it's the total opposite. It focuses on the moon and ignores the sun. So you have Ramadan is always going to be one lunar year after the previous Ramadan, but it can be in the summer, it could be in the winter, it could be in the spring, fall. It's the position of the earth to the sun is irrelevant for Ramadan. It's the earth's position to the moon. Whereas the Jewish calendar has to take all of the luminaries into consideration according to this verse 14 of Genesis chapter 1. So we have to build our calendar in a way that takes into consideration the sun and the moon and also the stars. Why do we need to do this? Well, we've got a couple of passages that explain why. One is Exodus chapter 12. We're talking about Passover. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be for you the head of the months. To you it shall be the first months of the year." So the Jewish calendar has to start with this month over here, whatever this month is, but we'll find out in a minute what it is. And verse 18 of that same passage says, "The first month on the 14th day of the month, in the evening you shall eat the unleavened bread," or as we call it, matzah in Hebrew. So that night from the 14th to the 15th is always going to be a full moon. Okay, so Passover always has to fall on a full moon. And then we find out in this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1, to keep the month of spring and make the Passover offering to the Lord your God. For in the month of spring, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt at night. So Passover must always be in the month of spring and on a full moon. So if you look up in the sky, and you see a full moon, and you see the correct constellations for spring, and I'm not very good with horoscopes or these constellations, but I think it's Aries or Taurus. Somebody out there knows better than I do which constellation it should be, but you have to see the correct constellation. You get a full moon, and it's spring, and the earth is in the correct position with the sun and moon and the stars. Then we can celebrate Passover, and only then. So can you imagine how complicated it is to accurately predict the Passover on our calendar? Our calendar is a complicated calendar to figure out, and we've had to do that from ancient times. This year, Passover is going to be on April 12th. My ancestors calculated that the full moon for the first month of spring will be on this date, and they did this centuries ago. I challenge everybody out there. How could they do this without accurately understanding the heliocentric model of our solar system? We're going to talk more about this later, but I'm dropping a seed right now for you to sort of mull over how that could have been possible. Verse 20. Now, this verse, I think, is a nail in the coffin for flat earthers, and I see that they like to sort of sweep this verse under the carpet. They like to talk about verse 8 and verse 6 and these earlier verses, but I've yet to hear one exegete this verse here, and I wonder why. Let's take a look at what it says. In the English, it says, "And God said that let the waters swarm a swarming of living creatures. Among them let fowl or birds fly over the earth across the expanse of the heavens." Now, I'm going to take issue with Chabad's translation over here because it's the same word al panei. So it's al panei rakia hashamayim. So they're saying across the expanse of the heavens. I would say that al panei implies that these birds are going on or above the rakia. So they fly on or above. Now, flat earthers love to be super literalists. I would literally like to have an explanation of how a bird can fly al, above, on top of rakia hashamayim. That's that in a nutshell. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Yeah, you're doing great. Okay, good. Um, so with that, I'd like to shift gears and respond to Dean Odle's video. And I have to say, I watched this 4 hour, 41 minute, and 47-second video, so you don't have to. You're welcome. Okay. Um, this video is the poster child for a person can take the Bible and make it say whatever they want it to say by cherry picking a verse here and there out of context, twisting it in a way that it doesn't say what they're claiming it says, and then cherry picking various translations all over the place and trying to fit this square peg into a round hole. And it's so convoluted and confusing that I had to watch it several times. So I repeat, you're welcome. I'm not going to let you off the hook altogether. I'm going to torture you with a little bit of his nonsense. Um, and we're going to watch a couple of minutes. I'm going to do two sections over here. One, yeah. Other
Expanded and but expanding something that's solid.
Hold on. There we go.
The Hebrew word for firmament is the Hebrew word rakia. It has a root word, a three-letter root word. So you have rakia is the word for firmament, and the root word is raka, according to not only what the Hebrew meant, but also what they believed. So we have to see how God uses it. But firmament rakia does not mean an empty expanse. Anybody who tells you that the firmament or rakia means empty expanse, like Dr. Danny Faulkner of Answers in Genesis, he will say it's an empty expanse. The Hebrew word. Literally, it says that it's an expansion of plates, broad plates beaten out. So it's literally, the word means taking something that's solid and beating it into a shape. Okay? That's the definition of the word. The verb raka acquires the sense of beating out precious metals, spreading that out, and results to spread over or to overlay. All right? He goes on here. Of course, this is the Brown Driver Briggs. It says, extended surface, solid, expanse as beaten out. Not an empty expanse, but expanding something that's solid over something. That's the picture of this word. And the Hebrews, the ancient Israelites, believed that it was solid. The firmament was a solid structure and called it the vault of heaven. So here's your definition. The vault of heaven, or firmament, regarded by the Hebrews as solid and supporting the waters above. This is what all of the ancient Jews believed, because they believed the Bible. Amen? They believed it about the firmament. Here is another lexicon. Jacinius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon defines rakia like this: the firmament of heaven spread out like a hemisphere above the earth, like a splendid, pellucid, translucently clear, transparent, crystalline, glassy, allowing the maximum passage of light, as glass, sapphire, stone, to which the stars were supposed to be fixed, and over which the Hebrews believed that there was a heavenly ocean. Now this is another lexicon defining it as they believed it, as the Bible spells it out, not as new Copernican Christians want to believe it is to be.
Okay, so I'm not going to torture you anymore. That was, I'd have to say, the most intelligent thing he had to say in his 4 hour, 41 minute, and 47-second sermon. Now, first thing I'd like to point out is that his sources are not Jewish. He's claiming that ancient Jews believe this. I do have to qualify that by saying that he does go on to talk about Josephus in the Greek, and I can't interact with Josephus in the Greek because I don't understand Greek, and it'd be irresponsible for me to do so. However, with what I saw him butcher in the Hebrew language, I can't imagine that he treated the Greek any better. But I would like to defer that to a Greek expert who could, or an expert on Josephus who could answer him. But in the Hebrew texts, all of his sources that he cites that claim to express what my ancestors believed, they were all non-Jewish sources. Second thing I'd like to point out is Reka means background, which fits nicely with expanse or sky. So you have birds flying in the background of the sky. Just pointing that little tidbit out there. Oh, and one more question in light of Genesis 1:20. How do birds and airplanes fly on top of this metal plate or crystal dome? If you remember, Genesis 1:20 said that birds fly on or above the Rakia Hashemayim. And commercial airplanes can fly even higher than birds, and I've been on my fair share of commercial airplanes. I have never crashed into a dome, taking off or landing on an airplane. If somebody else has out there, feel free to explain it, but I don't see how a plane could fly on top of a solid stone, metal, or crystal dome. But that's my question to put out there for him. The next little bit of torture, it's only going to be, I promise you, only a 30% torment that I'm going to have you watch, is on this topic that he claims is this will be the last little bit you'll have to listen to, and then we'll move on.
It doesn't work. And I will tell you why they call it missing mass. The missing mass is called the firmament. You're going to see that in a second. That's what, skip ahead here. I've already talked about this. This is what is called the Hebrew concept of the universe. This is what the Bible teaches. All right? And we'll get back to this in just a second, but it shows you that this is what the firmament is, the dome structure over the flat, non-rotating earth. Hell is beneath, heaven is above that. God's throne sits on that. This is what the Bible teaches. There's all of the scriptures around that. We're going to get to that in a second.
Okay. So here again, his sources are not Jewish. So here he's claiming that my ancestors believed this depiction, and yet he uses this image with this text that comes from a website called logos.com or logos.org. It's logos.something. It's a Christian website for pastors and not a Jewish website or a Jewish source. And I'd like to put a challenge out there for anybody who wants to look into whether or not my ancestors believed anything that looked like this depiction. I invite you to come to Jerusalem, to the National Library here in Jerusalem, which has the most extensive library collection of books of Jewish texts throughout history, all kinds of languages, and I challenge you to find a Jewish text in the National Library here in Jerusalem that depicts this as part of any kind of Jewish philosophy. If this flat earth is important to you, and you want to research the truth, then you should be happy to go to the National Library in Jerusalem. I've had to spend many hours there doing my own research. I can't claim that I've seen every book because it is an exhaustive collection of Jewish texts. But I'd be happy to even go with you if you want, and we can go together, or not if you don't want, and look for a Jewish text somewhere that depicts this imagery of the universe, or this portrayal of Jewish thought, thinking that our world looks like this. And by the way, before I move on, I want to point out another interesting thing. In the zeal to claim that the Earth is not a globe, I find it interesting that they depict this as a globe, a wrong globe, but a globe too. It's round, but never mind. Oh yes, one more question I have for flat earthers on this topic. How does water stick to a dome without a container or gravity? I don't know if anybody has heard this challenge from flat earthers to globers, but I'd like to repeat this back over to you. You claim that there's all of this water sticking to this dome on the sides over here and over here. And by the way, these sides are to the side of the Earth, not above the Earth. They're on the sides. But that's all just, technicalities, I'm sure. But explain to me how this water sticks to the sides of this dome. I'd be interested to hear how you explain that. Let's go to some real Jewish texts that are ancient. Okay. Now, my background is this timeline here that is 4,000 years of Jewish history, from time before the time of Abraham till today. I'd like to consult with a couple of texts to see if they can answer any of our questions that we have here tonight. One being the Mishnah, that was written between 180 and 200, and the Jerusalem Talmud, which was a continuation and an expansion from the years 200 400. That would be these texts here, the Mishnah and the Talmud. See if we can get any answers out of those. So the Mishnah, I have a link to this Mishnah here. I didn't copy it here simply for the sake of time, and it takes up a lot of space. But you're welcome to look at my source of information. Go to this Mishnah, Tractate Rosh Hashanah, Chapter 2, Mishnah 8. And I'll summarize what it's about. If you remember, earlier I talked about, when we were talking about Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, and the complexity of the Jewish calendar that was calculated in ancient times, and we still continue to use it to this day. And it has gone without a hitch most of the time, except for 1 year. There's only 1 year in documented history where there was a glitch in our calendar. And what it was when the Sanhedrin was on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, we had to calculate our new year every year. Now, each month, including the first month of a new year, starts on a lunar calendar with the new moon, which is this phase of the moon over here. Now, you can imagine to the untrained eye how it's very hard to see a new moon. There's just this tiny little sliver that, if you're not trained to look for it, is very hard to see. And you can mistake this new moon either for this waning crescent, which is on the wrong side, right? That's on the left side. This is on the right side. And if you make that mistake, then you'll go a day early. And if you wait too long and you get the waxing crescent, then you're going to be a day late in calculating the new year, or the first day of the month, right? So back in the temple era, we had sort of this triangulation of, in order to calculate when the new year was. We had this calculation, this mathematical calculation that we still use to this day. Alongside of that, there was this ceremonial ritual where they would invite witnesses to say that they saw the new moon, and it would be verified with the calculation. They would line up with each other, and the Sanhedrin would declare the new moon, and therefore a new month or a new year. However, this 1 year after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin, for the first time, was forced out of Jerusalem over to Yavne, which is over here. Now, you have a distance here of 60 kilometers or so, which is about 37 miles, and you have a difference in elevation. Yavne is along the coast here, which is close to sea level, and Jerusalem is in the mountains, a couple thousand feet, or a couple hundred meters high in altitude. And this first year after the destruction of the temple, where they had to move this distance, the sensitivity of the calculation is such that the Earth's rotation will skew it on that distance, that elevation, that distance. If you try to declare a new moon from the perspective of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, while in Yavne, then you're going to visually see the new moon appear at the wrong time, because you're seeing it from Yavne instead of Jerusalem. And there was this 1 year where they made this mistake of having the observation be out of line with the calculation, and it caused a crisis in Jewish identity. What do we do? What we've since done is we dropped that ceremony, because it only works on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and we only use that calculation. We've continued with the calculation to this day. And by the way, that calculation not only works for the moon, but also for the sun. Every week, Jews have to rest for the Sabbath, and the Sabbath starts Friday at sundown. And you can imagine sundown in Jerusalem and sundown in Tel Aviv are not the same time. They are different times. So if you look at any Jewish newspaper or any Jewish website that keeps track of what time sundown is on Fridays for the Sabbath, you will see that this distance from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv are going to have different times. They're going to have a list of when sundown is for Jerusalem, which is different from Tel Aviv, which is different from Haifa, different for Beersheba, and you also have similar things in the United States. This calculation is very sensitive to the rotation of the Earth, so that the small distances between Jerusalem and Yavne can skew it if you're not careful to stick with the calculation and recalibrate it for whatever place you are on the globe. And again, I'd like to reiterate my challenge. How could my ancestors have come up with that kind of a calculation if they thought that the Earth was flat? They would have had to understand the heliocentric model and had a really amazing and profound understanding of our universe around us in order to make that kind of a calculation. And we continue to rely on that same calculation to this day. I saved the best for last. This is a passage in the Jerusalem Talmud, which was written between 200 and 400 CE. And it is discussing, it's from Avodah Zarah, that's the tractate, page 3, side A. And it's talking about idolatry and the risks of idolatry, the risks of somebody having a world leader having so much power that there's a danger of idolatry, also for the Jews to slip into idolatry and trying to avoid idolatry. And this incident that it's citing is from the days of Alexander the Great, who visited Jerusalem, had a good relationship with Jews. But let's face it, was an idolater. And we do have these depictions of Alexander the Great on coins holding a bird in his hand, and there's apparently other depictions that I'm not aware of him holding a globe in his hand. Certainly we have other depictions of other leaders and spiritual figures holding the globe of the earth in their hand. And so the sages over here are discussing whether or not this unaccountable power can lead into idolatry. And the specific verse that I'm interested in is this one that's highlighted in light blue. And here's an English translation and a French translation. Let's read the English translation. But the sages say prohibited are only those in whose hand is a rod, or a bird, or a globe. Do you see that word globe over there? It's right there, globe. That's the English. That's just a translation. Let's go see what the Hebrew says. And sure enough, over here it says kador, which is a ball, or a sphere, or a globe. Okay? Up, and then it goes on, a rod by which he rules the world, a bird, and then it quotes a text, my hand reaches into the riches of people as to a bird's nest. Now here's the kicker, the last part of that verse. A globe for the world is globe-shaped. And I'd like to improve upon that translation a little bit. Let's look at the Hebrew, She'ha'olam asui k'kador, that the world is made as a sphere. This is an ancient text citing a source from the time of Alexander the Great. At the very least, Jews have understood that the earth is a globe, a sphere, since the time of Alexander the Great. Let that sink in for a minute. And by the way, if you want to find this passage and read it for yourself, here's the link to it on the internet. In conclusion, my ancestors settled here in Israel over 3,000 years ago, and we have had an unbroken history as a persecuted indigenous people in every generation. Anti-Semitism comes from ignorance and false allegations about Jewish beliefs, practices, and history. A lot of bloodshed could be avoided by opening dialogue with us Jews about what we believe and practice. Nowhere on the 4,000-year Jewish timeline shown over here on the screen do we see a depiction of a flat earth. Such a worldview is foreign to us. I repeat my challenge for anyone to visit the National Library in Jerusalem to try to find a Jewish depiction of a flat earth in any time in history. Thank you, Will Duffy, for opening a dialogue with Jews about what Jews think of the flat earth.
Thank you, David. That was amazing. I'm so glad you reached out and just said you wanted to offer help. I don't know Hebrew. I love learning about Hebrew and just about Jewish history. It's some of the most rich history in the world. Israel is just such an incredible place. So thanks again for being here. Why don't you tell people where to find you in case they'd like to contact you, watch more of your videos, or ask you follow-up questions?
Sure. Well, I will be looking at the comment section on this video, so I'll be happy to field questions here as well. My YouTube channel is Dr. D, DRD 1967.
Awesome. There was a question up here about Isaiah 40:20. The question is from Don White, and he's asking if that verse, which says something along the lines of "He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth," if that could mean sphere. That could mean sphere.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's do this. I want to do a brief and user-friendly, I'll switch this around, is Hug. It's not Kug, it's Hug, which means it translates ring, it translates circle, it also translates orb, and I'm having technical difficulties. I apologize for that. But yes, it can be anything that has a circumference. It could be a sphere, it could be an orb, it could be a ring, it can be a circle.
Great.
Great.
Okay, let me see if there are any other questions here. And again, sorry for the technical issues, but that's life. That happens. Just be happy we're talking to somebody on the other side of the globe. We did have a lively chat. I did notice some flat earthers that did not seem too interested in learning, unfortunately. Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, David, thank you so much for doing this. I know it's late in Israel right now, but I'm so happy, and I'm going to be continuing our conversations, bouncing things off of you to learn more about the Hebrew Scriptures. And I'm just, again, thankful that you gave your time for all of us here today.
Privileged to be here. I really appreciate it.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And hopefully you learned a lot. And we'll keep bringing more content that will help people get out of flat Earth and stop wasting their lives on this issue, and hopefully make the world a better place and using their time better. So take care, everyone. Bye-bye.